Welcome back to our channel, where we bring you stories steeped in darkness, tragedy, and the rawest depths of human emotion. This is the place where masks are torn away, secrets are dragged into the light, and the fragile balance of the human soul collapses under unbearable truths. Today, we descend into a narrative that is not merely about discovery, but about devastation, a revelation so brutal it shatters lives, burns away illusions, and leaves nothing behind but ashes and ruin. Ted stood frozen, the paper trembling in his hands. On its surface lay the sterile conclusion of science, the undeniable truth that June was his sister. The letters, sharp and merciless, pierced into his mind like blades. In that instant, time ceased to exist. The air thickened, pressing down upon him, suffocating him with the weight of knowledge that could not be undone. Memories cascaded through his mind like shards of glass. Every shared glance, every lingering touch, every unspoken bond that had once seemed thrilling now twisted into grotesque mockeries of themselves. The past, once alive with warmth and confusion, became nothing more than a graveyard of shame. Ted's stomach churned, his body recoiled, but his eyes remained locked upon the evidence, as though compelled to witness his own destruction. June stood a few steps away, her posture stiff yet trembling beneath the surface. She was both executioner and victim, the bearer of the truth and the prisoner of its shadow. By placing the document into Ted's hands, she had severed the fragile fabric of their reality. It was not liberation, not redemption, it was annihilation. Inside Ted, fury erupted. Not the loud, explosive kind, but a silent storm that clawed at the inside of his ribs. Rage at June for exposing him to this horror, rage at himself for walking blind into the abyss, rage at fate for weaving such a cruel design. The fire inside him spread, consuming reason, feeding on shame. He wanted to cast the paper away, but his grip only tightened until his knuckles blanched. The truth bound him like chains, it branded itself into his very flesh. June's eyes reflected his collapse, yet she did not move to console him. There was no comfort left to give, no words that could bridge the chasm that had opened between them. She carried her own torment, the years of silence, the poison of secrets corroding her from within. By unveiling the truth, she had hoped to release the pressure, to reclaim herself from the prison of deceit. Yet watching Ted unravel, she felt the crushing realization that she had only transferred the weight, breaking him in order to lighten her own burden. Ted staggered back, his chest heaving as though the walls themselves were closing in. He felt trapped in a body that was no longer his own. His reflection in the window caught his eye, and in that reflection he saw not himself but a monster, a grotesque distortion of a man who had trespassed unknowingly upon forbidden ground. He could not bear to look, yet could not turn away. Nights became torture chambers. Sleep, when it came, dragged him into worlds where June's face shifted between tenderness and condemnation. In dreams, her hand would reach for him, only to become a dagger piercing his chest. He awoke drenched in sweat, gasping as though clawing his way out of the grave. His mind offered no escape, every path led back to the same pit of despair. He withdrew from the world. The isolation was suffocating, but it felt deserved. Each day he sank deeper, silence pressing against his ears until it roared like thunder. He punished himself with solitude, believing that distance was the only shield left between his shame and the eyes of others. Yet even alone, he could not escape. The voice within him, relentless and merciless, whispered the truth over and over: June is your sister. You cannot undo what has been done. June herself wandered through her own desolate labyrinth. She had thought unveiling the truth would be a cleansing fire, but it became a wildfire that consumed without mercy. Every time she saw Ted's broken figure, the weight of her decision pressed harder. She questioned whether she had revealed the truth for his sake, or simply to unburden herself. The mirror offered no answers. In her reflection, she saw a woman both strong and destroyed, both just and cruel. The house they shared became a tomb. Walls that once contained laughter and warmth now absorbed silence like a sponge. Each room echoed with ghosts of what once was, now twisted into reminders of what could never be again. The air grew heavier, a permanent dusk settling within, as if even the light itself recoiled from entering. Ted's fury turned inward. He began to despise his own existence. His skin felt contaminated, his breath impure, his very presence a curse. He longed to tear himself apart, to find some way of excising the part of him that had crossed the line of blood and fate. No ritual could cleanse him, no act of penance seemed enough. He became a shadow, wandering aimlessly through days that held no meaning. June, too, burned in silence. She wanted to scream, to tear the walls down with her bare hands, to expel the poison inside her veins. Instead, she walked through life with a mask of composure, hiding the storm beneath. But every glance at Ted's hollow face drove nails deeper into her own soul. She had not freed herself, she had shackled them both to an endless punishment. Time offered no healing. Instead, it deepened the cracks, widened the wounds. Ted grew restless, haunted by the thought that there was no escape but destruction. His mind began to whisper darker solutions, pathways that ended in silence eternal. He imagined the sea swallowing him whole, imagined the void embracing him, imagined a release from the relentless suffocation of truth. One night, as thunder rolled and rain lashed against the windows, Ted stood upon the edge of a cliff overlooking a raging ocean. The wind tore at his clothes, the waves below crashed with violent hunger. He felt the abyss calling, promising peace in exchange for surrender. His body trembled, not from fear, but from the unbearable weight pressing him forward. Far behind him, June stood frozen. She had followed, driven by a force she could not name. She watched him standing on the precipice, a figure carved in agony against the storm. Her heart pounded, torn between rushing to pull him back and allowing fate to claim him. She knew she held some power in this moment, yet she also knew she had been powerless from the start. Ted leaned forward, the roar of the sea echoing in his ears, drowning out every other thought. For a brief moment, he closed his eyes, and in the darkness behind them he saw June's face, not as a sister, not as a stranger, but as the embodiment of the truth that had destroyed them both. A final surge of rage and despair ignited within him, and he let the storm take him. June's scream was lost to the thunder. The sea claimed him, the waves devouring his body as if eager to erase the mistake of his existence. She collapsed upon the ground, the rain mingling with her tears, her body convulsing with the weight of realization. In her pursuit of freedom through truth, she had delivered the death of the one who had been closest to her. Silence returned after the storm, but it was not peace. It was the silence of ruin, the aftermath of a tragedy that could never be undone. June remained, but what remained of her was only fragments, a woman haunted, condemned to live with the knowledge that her act of revelation had brought about the destruction she could not prevent. The truth had been unveiled. But in its unveiling, it had obliterated everything. And so the story ends, not with redemption, but with the cold, unflinching hand of despair. If you want to continue exploring stories of darkness, tragedy, and the raw truths that shatter lives, make sure to follow and subscribe to our channel.